General Election Candidate Forum, sponsored by the Raton Professional Businesswomen and broadcast live from the historic Shuler Theater on KRTN FM 93.9. Before we get started, would everyone please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm Stephanie Osborne, President of the Raton Professional Businesswomen. Raton PBW is a nonpartisan organization, and we are honored to present this candidate forum tonight so that the citizens can be informed about county and state issues and get to know the candidates before they head to the polls. Tonight's forum will be conducted to be fair to all candidates and to the audience. I would like to introduce and thank our PBW members present this evening. When I call your name, please stand. We have our timekeeper, Paula Cacciatore, who will give a 30-second warning and will advise when time has elapsed for response. At this warning, the speaker should complete the sentence and discontinue speaking. Candidates will be allowed a 3-minute opening statement, 1.5 minutes to answer a question, and at the end of the forum, 2 minutes for their closing statement. Our moderator this evening will be Michael Ann Antonucci. Our pages will be PBW members Mercy Swanson, Casey Camp, Liz Tafoya, and Lynette Simpson. They will gather the written questions from the audience, so just raise your hand and they will come pick up your questions. Myself and Melissa Unger will be the screeners this evening. All questions from the floor will be pre-screened for appropriateness and applicability to the office being sought. I would like to thank KRTN for setting up the sound system and for broadcasting the forum live tonight. I would like to invite Colfax County Clerk Rayetta Trujillo to the podium to provide some important voter information before we introduce the candidates.
Thank you. Good evening. I'd like to start off by wishing everybody the best of luck and congratulating everybody for making it out of the primary election. I'd like to go over a few things. I'd like to give some of the information that we've had for the voters so far. In the county clerk's office, we have had 316 early voters. My chief deputy, Sarah Torres, and I have been out running the mobile voting centers in Springer. We had 45, and today we had 8 in Maxwell. On Thursday, the mobile voting center will be in Cimarron from 9 to 4 at the Village Hall. Sarah and I will run the mobile voting center in Eagle Nest from 9 to 4 on Friday, and we will be in Angel Fire at the Community Center from 12 to 5. So everybody get out and vote. Currently, we have issued we have 78 absentee ballot applications that are still out. We have received 25 and issued 186 ballots by mail. The last day to vote in the office will be Saturday, November the 3rd. The last day for us to issue an absentee ballot by mail will be November 1st. We will be voting in the county clerk's office on Saturday, November the 3rd from 10 to 6. And in Colfax County, we have 8,507 voters, and we've had about 8% of the voters come in and vote early for us already. Thank you.
I would like to thank everyone again for attending. I will now turn the mic over to our moderator, Michael Ann Antonucci, who will introduce our candidates this evening.
Thank you all for attending. It's my honor to introduce our candidates this evening. Just so I could give a quick rundown of the format, our candidate forum does consist of the candidates for the District 7 state representative position. We have the magistrate judge position, county assessor, and also probate judge candidates. In addition, we did send out invitations to the state candidates. It is a rather large ballot this year, so I believe there's over 36 candidates. With us this evening, we do have United States Representative candidate, Republican Party candidate, Gerald Steve McFall. And our other candidates for District 67, State Representative Mark McDonald. Democratic Party candidate, Republican Party candidate Jackie Chatfield. For Magistrate Judge, we have Democratic Party candidate Sarah Montoya. Republican Party candidate Warren Walton. And our County Assessor candidate, who's running unopposed, is Christy Graham. And our probate judge candidates, Democratic Party Patrick Casillas, and Republican Party Royal Quent. So thank you for being in attendance this evening. I also did receive word that Michelle Garcia Holmes, Lieutenant Governor candidate running with Steve Pierce, may be joining us here a little bit later this evening, so we'll also give her an opportunity to speak. So with that, we're going to do the opening statements, and I'd like to invite Gerald Steve McFall up to give his opening statement. I guess I should go over that. So each candidate will be giving a 3-minute opening statement, and we're really pleased that you could join us this evening.
Good evening. It's good to see people out trying to get informed and educated on who's running for office and what they're all about. It's so hard to get people out to political events. It's nice to see people show up. And good luck to everybody that's out here. I know how hard it is to get out. I'm glad I don't have to sit up here with these guys tonight. My name is Steve McFall. Most of you may know my family either from Springer or the Price family from Raton. Fred and Carrie Price were my grandparents who lived up here. So I am a local boy. I grew up between Springer and Cimarron. I'm a farm boy. I've never been elected to a public office, so I am, as the founding fathers wanted, I'm going to walk straight out of a field from farming to do our business in Washington, D.C. and then come back. I'm not a career politician. In my opinion, that's the problem with our government right now, is career politicians. About 7 years ago, God got my attention by knocking me all the way to homeless to get me to do something besides teach Texans how to ski. And he knocked me down to the bottom, and I started with $3.16 to my name. And now I just married this lovely lady out here 4 months ago. I finished raising my daughter, who's now a college student at UNM in Taos. I'm a senior in college, and I'm running for Congress, so there's no reason to stay poor, even in this state. I think God got my attention and knocked me through that, so I learned a few things. Because I lived through the system and made it from $3.16, I know how to deal with poverty. I know the issues that the folks deal with there and how to fix that problem. I also can see for the rest of us, now that I've made it back out of that and I'm back in the middle class, that it's still pretty hard for people to live. The biggest reason that is because of the federal government, the burden that they're placing on us right now. Even though we had tax cuts, which are working, and I've heard from hundreds of people around this state how the tax breaks have helped them, either with more money in their paycheck or increasing the size of their business, but it's still hard for the average American to make it. Too many people have to make decisions now whether they buy groceries this week or gas to go to work. Have to decide whether they, even going to a movie may cost you your electric bill. I'm in that boat right now where I don't have health insurance and ended up in the hospital here a while back, so I got a really big health bill. But I shouldn't have had to make that choice. The federal government hasn't dealt with that issue either, and that's why healthcare is such a mess. But the biggest problem is the size of our government and what they're doing. We need to reduce the size of our government. Everybody griped about the bill that they passed, the tax bill, or not the tax bill, but the budget, and it was huge, and it will add to our deficit. But nobody ever talks about reducing the size of our federal government. It's way too big. There's a bunch of it that we can get rid of. Most of it is redundant, and the state does already anyway, so we can get rid of a lot of the federal departments, which will reduce the taxes and reduce the burden on us. I got my sign out there, so my time's about up. My name is Steve McFall. I'll be around after this is over if anybody has any questions about anything. Again, thank you all for being here, and have a good evening. God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. McFall. Okay, for our opening statements with our candidates here on the stage.
So I'll just turn that on for you.
We'll go ahead and start with our state representative candidates. Mark McDonald.
Thank you. Well, good evening, everybody, and thank you for being here. Thank you to the professional businesswomen for holding this and hosting this. Thank you to the community for being here and being active and engaged in the political process. My name is Mark McDonald, and I'm running for state representative in your district, District 67. I was actually born here in Raton. I was raised in Union and Colfax County, so I too am local. I graduated high school just down the road in Des Moines in 2010, and after graduating high school, I actually attended the University of New Mexico, where I obtained my paramedic education. After that, I traveled around the state providing rural health care in community after community, including providing critical care medicine as a flight paramedic, and I'm currently a regional business manager for that same company. So on a day-to-day basis, I get to secure healthcare resources for rural New Mexico, which is the fight of my lifetime, and I thoroughly enjoy what I do. In February, I decided that I was going to run for this seat because, believe it or not, I grew up in Raton when we did have a booming Main Street, especially in comparison to what we have now. And over the years, I've watched as small businesses declined. We have businesses that open shop and then they shut down, or they cross state borders because of the regulations here in New Mexico don't make it feasible for business to thrive. I've watched as my own neighbors and friends, farmers and ranchers, live under burdensome taxes that are unnecessary, all the while remaining discouraged because corporate executives and corporations in the southern part of the state continue to get large tax cuts. I've watched as my own grandparents struggle to make ends meet because we have such a non-diverse revenue stream in this state that we've decided that it's best to tax our Social Security recipients. And I've watched as people in my community, my friends, your friends, who are educators who have been invested in communities for 20 or 30 years, pushed aside and treated with disrespect at the sake of saving a couple of dollars. I've watched as family members have been transported hours away, 100 miles away, to receive health care that they should be able to receive in their communities. And all of these are solvable issues, but we need a leader. Spending time in Santa Fe doesn't merely qualify one to be a state representative. What does qualify someone to be a state representative is someone who comes to the table with solutions, who comes to the table with ideas, and I am that candidate. I have traveled this district many times over, I have listened to my constituents, and I am ready to help you, this community, solve these issues. Again, my name is Mark McDonald, and I thank you for your questions this evening, and I am running for State House of Representatives, District 67.
Thank you. Our next candidate for state representative is Republican candidate Jackie Chatfield.
Thank you all for coming out. My name is Jack Chatfield. I'm running for State Representative District 67. I'm pro-life, pro-business, and a strong supporter of the Second Amendment right. I'm a strong advocate for property rights. They are the essence of freedom. I believe in personal responsibility and enough freedom to require it. I believe that government is best when kept small and close to the people. I'm a Christian. I believe in God. I'm a lifelong New Mexican, raised on a family ranch in southern New Mexico. My wife Jill and I, who very much appreciate her driving me in tonight, sitting there in the front row. We've been married 25 years and we've raised 5 children between us. Actually, we've raised several more foster children over the years. I have 15 years experience as the manager of the Canadian River Watershed Restoration Project, which is a collaboration of 8 soil and water conservation districts and 21 state and federal agencies. The last several years we've put about $5 million a year on the ground down the Canadian River watershed to get rid of the non-native invasive species and replace it with native species. I'm an NRA member. I served with the Mosquero School Board for 16 years. And I have 15 years experience at the New Mexico State Legislature working as an advocate for our rural communities, our schools, property rights, agriculture, and the custom and culture of New Mexico. I am very familiar with the legislative process and the people that make it happen. And I'm here tonight to ask for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is running for Magistrate Judge, Democratic Party candidate Sarah Montoya.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I was born and raised here in Colfax County, so a lot of people here already know me. I went to Springer Schools. My mother was the bookkeeper for Springer Schools. My father was employed by New Mexico Boys School when it was a boys' school. I have raised 4 children. I have 6 grandchildren. My husband, Rick Madalini, is also from here in Raton, and our youngest daughter is currently in her 2nd year at UNM studying medical laboratory science. Running for magistrate judge would be a big change in our lives because I've been running my own business here for over 20 years. I am a practicing attorney. I have 3 degrees from Trinidad State Junior College. I have a bachelor's degree from Western New Mexico University, an MBA from New Mexico State University, and a Juris Doctorate from University of Arizona in Tucson. That university is a top quartile law school. The people who write the law books are the professors there. And I was very blessed and honored to be able to attend that school. After finishing that, I did work as a prosecutor for a short period of time and worked my way back to Raton because my parents were getting up in age and I very much wanted to be near them, and it turned out to be the right decision because my father passed away in 1999. I feel like I've been very successful with my business here, and it would be, as I said, a big change for our family, but it was a change that I feel I needed to step up and try to make because I've seen some things not working well with our legal system here in Colfax County. So that's the reason I'm running, and I would appreciate your support in the voting booth. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is Republican Party candidate Warren Walton.
Good evening, everybody. I want to thank the BPW for holding this tonight. This is a very good service that you provide our community. You know, the Colfax County, as everybody knows, is massive. I'm sure all of us have been covering it for the last several weeks. I know I have. And if it wasn't for the radio, a lot of people couldn't hear this information. So I appreciate you putting this on, and I appreciate KRTN putting this on the radio. Again, my name is Warren Walton. I'm from this area. I graduated from New Mexico State University with a bachelor's in education. I went on to get my commission at the New Mexico State University ROTC. I got out of the military as a captain. I was a helicopter pilot. Came back to Raton, taught here 3 years. Whoop, we just went out. There it is. Anyway, taught here 3 years, and then went to work for the railroad, and then I was appointed to this position by then Governor Gary Johnson. I've been the magistrate judge here for 17 years. I've been re-elected 4 times. I very, very much love my job. I think that my job gives me the ability to help people who have made mistakes. I help people get into treatment. I help people understand what they've done, whether right or wrong, and we correct those things through court. we give people the ability to come to court and settle their civil differences in an amenable way. So I would appreciate your vote and your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next candidate is County Assessor, Democratic Party candidate Christy Graham, running unopposed.
Thank you, Michael Ann. Good evening, ladies, gentlemen, and of course the radio listeners. Thank you all for coming out to the 2018 forum. My name is Christy Graham, and I have been the Chief Deputy Assessor now for 8 years. I am running unopposed for the Assessor's Office, and myself and Linda have done so much in the Assessor's Office. We've educated the taxpayers, just really have showed them what the Assessor's Office does, educated them. A little bit about myself. I'm born and raised in Raton. I graduated from Raton High in 1985. I have a very special fiance, David Pacheco, 2 sons, Justin and Jeremy Cisneros. My mom and dad are John Roy and Connie Graham. Before I became the Chief Deputy Assessor, I worked 12 years for Title Services. I had the opportunity to open the new title company, Northeast Title, and worked for them for 12 years. But I want to thank everybody for their vote in the primary. Like I said, I'm running unopposed, and thank you all for coming out. Thank you.
Our next 2 candidates are running for probate judge. We have Democratic Party candidate Patrick Casillas.
Good evening. Thank you, Professional Women, for putting this on tonight. Also, thank you very much. Also, Billy D with KRTN, thank you also for broadcasting this. My name is Patrick Casillas. Most of you probably know me because I used to be the county sheriff here for 8 years before I retired 4 years ago. Since then, I've been doing part work for the federal government as a U.S. Postal part-time carrier in the rural areas of Colfax County. As I've been campaigning for this position, people have been asking me, why did you run for county sheriff again? And I said, well, you know, I had my time, and there are new people out there that have new ideas, and they just deserve their chance to do that also. So when they asked me, well, why are you running for probate judge? I said, well, half of my adult life, I served the public. I've always served the public. And so I still have that in my blood. And so the next best thing besides the county sheriff is being your probate judge. And that's what I'm looking forward to doing, and serving you again, just as my capacity as I was at the county sheriff. And I thank you very much for your support.
Our next probate judge candidate is Royal Quint, Republican Party.
Well, good evening. My name is Royal Quint, and I'm running for Colfax County Probate Judge. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Raton PBW for sponsoring this candidate forum, and also to thank everyone in attendance. For those of you that don't know me, I've lived in Raton County for 30 years, in Raton for 30 years, and raised my family here. I recently retired from a 34-year banking career in Colfax County. I believe Colfax County is a very special place to live, work, and raise a family. As I've been out on the campaign trail, a lot of people have asked me, what does a probate judge do? A probate judge may admit original wills to probate and appoint a personal representative or special administrator to handle the legal affairs for the deceased estate. My background in business, finance, and real estate will provide a good foundation to ensure that I'm able to perform the duties of probate judge. As part of my prior banking duties, I have experience in working with customer wills, personal representative, and surviving account owners. Also, I have an associate degree in accounting and management, and the state of New Mexico provides yearly training for all probate judges. As a candidate for judicial office, my campaign must be conducted differently from other campaigns for other offices. My political views must be put aside to ensure that probate proceedings are handled in a fair and impartial manner for all citizens of Colfax County. I want to assure you that if I'm elected, all probate proceedings will be handled per probate law, and I will also work with the current probate judge, Judge Ackerman, to ensure a smooth transition. Again, I want to thank the Raton PBW for sponsoring this event, and I want to thank everybody in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you to all of our candidates. Okay, I just want to remind our audience, if you have questions, please pass them to the aisle, and we have runners that will pick those up. So we have a few in the audience. With that, we're going to go ahead and start the question and answer portion of the forum. I have a couple questions here to get started. The first one's going to be for our magistrate judge candidates. Okay, this question says, where can I find accurate information about the experience and qualifications of the candidates running for the judge of the Court of Appeals?
There is a website. All of the judges are reviewed, and even our district judge here are peer reviewed. And so people who have appeared before them answer questions, a survey as it were, and the results are tabulated and they are put on the Judicial Standards website.
Thank you. We'll let Mr. Walton, I can repeat the question if you'd like.
I'll just say ditto.
And just as a reminder, our candidates have 1.5 minutes to respond to the questions from the audience. Okay, thank you. Okay, this question is for our District 67 candidate, Jack Chatfield. And the question is, can you work as hard to protect our First Amendment rights and freedoms as you will for the Second Amendment?
You know, I believe I believe in the Constitution. I believe in all the amendments and all the freedom they're guaranteed by that Constitution, and I think that people have laid down their life over the years to protect those rights, and I would like to fight for them all.
Okay, Mr. Chatfield, this is a two-part question. The second part says, can you work to save women's health programs?
Yes, I think that there are certain basic things that are real small rural communities in eastern New Mexico should have. One of them is a health clinic. The other is a senior citizen center, a school that educates our children. I think these are basic things. We pay the same taxes that the people in Albuquerque pay, but oftentimes we don't get the same services. And I've been 15 years down in Santa Fe fighting to see that happens. I would really like to have a vote, not just to be able to ask someone for their vote, but I'd like to go down there and be able to vote to see that our little facilities are funded and that those services that we deserve get out here.
Okay, thank you. This next question is actually for Mr. Chatfield and Mr. McDonald, our representatives for District 67. What type of water law does New Mexico function under? It said, what type of water law does New Mexico function under?
That's a good question. So the specifics of the water law are lengthy, and I think that we all know that. I think that the most important thing that we can do from District 67 moving forward to make that water law better is to stand up and say we will not sell the water that we have in this state to our border states. And that's what I'm committed to doing. So the laws, as they read right now, do allow for that kind of transaction. I don't think that we should be selling our water to any state. I think we need to invest in protecting the water New Mexico has, keep it here, and look forward to taking that fight on in Santa Fe along with some other really big advocates for water conservation in the state.
Thank you. Mr. Chatfield?
New Mexico functions under the doctrine of prior appropriation. Beneficial use is the basis, the measure, and the limit of the right. Our neighbor Texas functioned under riparian law. Quickly said, in Texas, if you own the land, you own the water on it and under it. In New Mexico, if you put that water to beneficial use, it belongs to you in the order that you put it to use. In the order of the age that it was used. So it's two very different laws, and I think it is very much necessary to understand New Mexico law, to know who our state engineer is, Mr. Tom Blaine. I think that's one of the most, water is undoubtedly one of the most essential issues in New Mexico. I think it's very important to understand it.
Okay, here's another question from an audience member, kind of along those lines, so we'll stay with Mr. Chatfield. What is your stance on water conservation in regards to farming and ranching, given the trends in weather and shrinking aquifers?
I think that we're putting a lot of new techniques on the ground that use less water. I've spent the last 15 years managing the Canadian River Riparian Restoration Project, trying to rid our rivers that are choked with salt cedar and other non-native invasive species. One salt cedar with an 8-inch diameter trunk uses 200 gallons of water a day, and they reach densities of up to 5,000 per acre. So just cleaning up our watershed. We also sprayed about 70,000 acres of mesquite, masticated a lot of pinon juniper, which causes your springs to come back almost immediately downstream from those treatment areas. It increases your mule deer habitat. So watersheds and water are very important to me, and that's how we're trying to create a little more water for our farmers.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, would you like for me to repeat the question? What is your stance on water conservation in regards to farming and ranching, given the trends in weather and shrinking aquifers?
That's a great question. So again, as I said before, I think one trend that we've seen too often in the state over the past has been the idea of giving our water away. We've got to stop that. I think that there's plenty of water in the southern part of the state that we can put to good use and keep northern New Mexico water in northern New Mexico. I do thank Mr. Chatfield for his work on the Conservatory Commission that he's been on, and certainly done important work. We've talked about these issues, specifically I have with the federal delegation, and I'm proud to receive the personal endorsement from Martin Heinrich, who agrees that this is an issue of not just this generation, but generations to come. And we need to address this issue not only from the state level, but somebody from District 67 needs to have a good working relationship with our federal delegation to secure resources and assets to ensure that New Mexico water stays in New Mexico, that our farmers and ranchers can use it, and I'm happy to take on that fight.
Okay, I still have several more for Mr. Chatfield and Mr. McDonald, but I think we'll give somebody else a chance. Do you have something? Okay, here's a couple for our magistrate judge candidates. This one specifically is addressed to Warren Walton. Please explain how the New Mexico Supreme Court ruling affected your ability to keep some suspects in jail.
Okay, so, good grief, it was about two years ago as of July, about a year and a half ago, I guess I would say. The Supreme Court passed a new rule that talks about bail bonds. Basically what it says, and I can't quote it to you perfectly, but it basically says that when a judge takes a look at an individual during arraignment, if that individual is not on bail through another court, not pending another court, or is not on probation or parole, that person has to be released. Now, there are some security issues that a judge can take into consideration where if they're a release problem for someone in the community or for the community as a whole, the judge can then put them on a bracelet or have maybe a third-party custodian monitor them. But those are new rules that have gone into place in the last 2 years, and it has changed completely our caseload, meaning that now if I hold somebody in jail for a certain period of time, or I set a bond that's a little out of their reach, they have the right to be in front of me again within 3 days with their attorney to ask for a reduction of bond hearing. So those are the new changes. Before those changes, the sky was the limit. The judge had discretion to set any bond he wanted to, but that has all changed.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, this next question is for candidate Sarah Montoya. This audience member asks, can you please explain in the Wayne Bent trial how you justified your argument that he did not commit statutory rape?
Okay, that was a case that happened very, very long ago. It was tried in Taos County. What I did is I used a prop during the trial. It was a Barbie doll with a bikini on it. And I asked the two alleged victims if he touched them anywhere on their bodies that was covered by the bikini. Both of them said he did not. So there was no sexual intercourse that took place in that case, and even so, he was convicted of contributing to the delinquency of a minor, 2 counts, and criminal sexual contact, 1 count. It's a very old case, and I justify it because that's my job. It's my job to defend these individuals to the fullest extent. The rules of professional conduct require that we engage in what is called zealous advocacy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Montoya. This next question is for our 2 state representative candidates. We'll let Mr. McDonald go first. How will you help Raton become more visible in the state legislature? It seems that our little town gets forgotten until election time.
Absolutely. Well, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm from here. I was born and raised in this community. I'm vested in this community. It's a very large district by landmass, there's no doubt about it. I know the frustrations of feeling like we've taken a back seat, like we're the redheaded stepchild of the state, and I'm excited to stand up on not only Raton's behalf, but on the behalf of all of the communities and municipalities in District 67 to say what is right for our communities and what's not right for our communities. I think having a strong voice, someone who is able and has proven time and time again to be able to stand up to anybody with special interest and push us to the back of the line, you know, they're going to hear my voice. So being from here, I know the frustrations, but knowing the frustrations isn't enough. Understanding the frustrations, having a solution is important, and I again have those solutions because I have engaged with the constituents all throughout the entire district. There's the concern that if you're from Raton, Raton will be heard and not the rest of the communities. I can assure you that that's not the case. I'm invested in all of these communities, and I take very seriously the job of representing the entire district, not just small portions of it like we've seen over the last 10 years.
Thank you.
No, ma'am, I think I got it. Raton is important to the rest of New Mexico for a variety of reasons. One of the reasons is it's the top of the watershed for the Canadian River. We brought quite a bit of funding in here and cleaned up the Canadian River. It needs the sprouts treated again. We've already been working with the REC, which provides the services for the schools around northeastern New Mexico. It provides the therapists and the people that go into our small schools. Last year, the Raton REC did not get funded. There were 2 in the state that didn't get funded. They called me, we went down, talked to the appropriate people and got their funding. We got the full amount of funding, got them fully funded. We're also working with several junior colleges around the state to help the children that, the REC, the board is made up with all the superintendents in northeastern New Mexico. So we're putting forth a program that would allow the students in our schools to get dual credit. They could learn a trade or a vocation and get dual credit.
Okay, thank you. Actually, here's another question for our two state representatives. Since you're going to be representing us in Santa Fe, the winner of this election, an audience member wants to know, are you for capital outlay reform? We'll address that to Mr. McDonald first.
Sure, absolutely. So this is a question that's come up to me multiple times over the campaign, and I think it's a good question. Look, I think if we're not looking for ways to better ourselves from a state perspective, we're not doing our jobs. With that being said, capital outlay is one of those processes that tends to be a little confusing. If you live in a community like Raton, where your state representative doesn't have great relations, doesn't show up, you don't necessarily know the process of going through the capital outlay through the entire process. And so if you know the process, you're well connected, it's a good process. But if you're not, it's hard for a community who seems to be forgotten to go through that process. I think that if there was a solution, a way that we could reform capital outlay to make it more feasible for the entire state, absolutely. If the system wasn't better as proposed than what it is now, obviously I wouldn't advocate for it changing, but I think that there are better ways and better solutions to the capital outlay, yes.
Thank you.
I think our capital outlay system works quite well. The biggest problem with it the last couple of years is there wasn't any money. And we need to diversify the income streams in our state so that we're not dependent on a single source of income to put money in the coffers.
Thank you. Just a reminder to our audience, if you do have questions, please raise your hand and our runners will pick them up. Okay, our next question is once again for our magistrate judge candidates. We'll direct this one to Warren Walton first. What role can you play in helping the county with the recidivism at the detention center?
I think that the most important thing to control and work with recidivism is to get people into treatment. As everyone here knows, Colfax County does not have any treatment facilities. We just recently lost Tri-County. It was the only facility that I could send anybody to for monitoring for any kind of mental issues locally. I used to send people over there to have individuals who would be assigned to I guess I would call them defendants, and they would watch them take their medications. They would be sure that they took them every day. Well, we don't have that anymore. And we also don't have anything to send anybody to as far as an alcohol treatment facility. The closest facility we had was Taos. They had a 7-day detox center. It's now shut down, it's gone. And so this is a huge issue for Colfax County. One of the things that we're requiring families to do when their loved ones go to jail is we're requiring them to look into treatment facilities for their loved ones. And it's very difficult. There is grant money available for those people to go who can't afford it. But I have to say, we live in the very northern part of the state, and a lot of these facilities are 200-300 miles away, and it is very difficult. So we need to do something about getting better treatment for our local people here.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Montoya, would you like for me to repeat the question?
No, ma'am. One of the ways to combat recidivism here is not always through treatment, because there is recidivism of drug addicts after treatment. It's one of the things that happens almost naturally. It's very, very difficult to beat drug addiction. And the problem is, as long as the drug addicts are out on the streets, they're going to be committing burglaries, they're going to be committing crimes in order to get money in their pockets to pay for their drugs. So what we need to do is work as best we can with law enforcement to make sure they're doing their job. And what a judge does is often have to decide whether or not a search warrant is legal. So if a lot of things are going wrong in the investigatory side, then the upper echelon of the police departments need to be advised. And we used to have judicial meetings, and we used to have trainings by the district attorney's office for the police officers, and that's not happening anymore. So I would encourage that to begin again. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Montoya. I'd like to give our candidates on the stage a break. We do have joining us now in the audience this evening is our Lieutenant Governor Republican candidate, Michelle Garcia Holmes is here, and I'd like to invite her up to the stage and give her an opportunity to make a 3-minute statement.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
Well, good evening. What a beautiful theater. I really can appreciate this. What a beautiful town. I'm Michelle Garcia Holmes. I am running for Lieutenant Governor, and I'm paired on the ticket with Congressman Steve Pierce. And we have been traveling all over the state. It's been quite a journey. 33 counties in New Mexico, and I am so impressed by our beautiful state. The diversity, the kids, the parades. We've attended so many parades. But the one thing that troubles me, and you all just had to answer a question about it, was addiction, drug addiction in our state. You know, Steve and I both truly believe that the lack of opportunity, our economy, our education system, you know, contribute to all of this. When we have difficulties in our education system, we can't graduate our kids. We have to graduate our kids. They have to fulfill their dreams. They have to have more opportunities. You know, Steve puts it very simply, let teachers teach. And I agree with him. My grandmother was a teacher. My daughter is a teacher. We have to let our teachers teach. This time that they are consumed with spending testing these children, it's invaded the whole education process. Yes. Do we need to test our kids? Yes, we do. We need to test them and find out exactly what they want to do, what their dreams are, who they want to be. Do they want to be a doctor? Do they want to work in the trades? Do they want to be a lawyer? Do they want to run for office someday? But let's help guide them to fulfill their dreams. And that is one of the biggest things I think we have to start with. Crime across our state. Some areas have no crime at all. I was in Los Alamos a while back, and I said, how many people have been a victim of crime? And absolutely nobody raised their hand. You know, it's interesting, but you go to Albuquerque, and everybody raises their hand. So there are different parts of the state that have different needs, and we have to address those needs. The economy. Are we going to depend on gas and oil all our lives? We can't. It's a volatile system. We have to diversify our economy. And we have to work hard to figure out what is going to work in New Mexico. We have to have tax reform to support our small businesses. Those are just some of the things Steve and I want to work on. And I want to let you know, as we've been traveling across the state, there has been tremendous support. So I thank you for giving me a few minutes to speak tonight and kind of share our vision for our state. And I ask for your vote for Steve and I ask for your support. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here tonight.
Okay, we'll begin again with our question and answers. We do have a question here for our probate candidates, if you'll pass the microphone down to the end. We'll start with Patrick Casillas. Why is probate important?
Well, probate is important, you know, the fact that when a person passes on, their assets and their estate needs to be settled, and it needs to be given proper looking at and proper equal division to the heirs that are entitled to the property of the deceased person. And as part of probate, you need to look at every aspect of the person's property, the personal representatives, the heirs, make sure that everything is properly filed in the probate court. There are two types of probate. There's an informal probate, which is usually handled by the probate judge, and then there's a formal probate, which is usually filed by a district court judge. And so most probates are handled informally through a district judge, through a probate judge, and the probate judge usually needs to take a good look at all aspects of the probate and all aspects of property to ensure that that probate is properly settled.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Royal Quint.
Well, I think the probate process is very important, especially for small communities and of course in Colfax County. I think we can play a vital role in helping the probate process as probate judge as we get in there and look at the original will, which we can admit to the probate court, and then from that name a personal representative or a special administrator to take care of the legal affairs of the estate. I think it's really important because a lot of those probate cases are filed informally, meaning they can go through the probate court, or formally, or contested ones go through the district court. So it'd be my goal and objective to go into office, look at the hours, be flexible on those hours with the people of Colfax County, and also look at setting appointments if necessary for people to come in and meet with the judge to make sure that we take care of the needs of the citizens of Colfax County.
Thank you. This next question is directed to all the candidates. I'll go ahead, we'll let Christy Graham start since she has the microphone. What can you do to improve mental health outcomes in the region?
Well, first of all, we need to have some kind of place that we can house these mental patients and give them the support they need. And that's it.
Let's go ahead and we'll pass it down to probate judge candidate Patrick Casillas. What can you do to improve mental health outcomes in the region?
You know, as an elected official, I think every elected official and every city leader, county leader should get together and kind of get a plan, you know. As you know, earlier in the evening, you know, one of our facilities here in Raton was shut down, Tri-County. That was a very important program here in Colfax County. We got to find funding for those programs, especially whether we can go to the legislation and as a group, the whole Colfax County, and try and get some money to open up such a facility here. You know, we were successful in getting a VA here for our veterans. Why can't we do the same thing for our mental health people? I think as a county and as city leaders and as elected officials, I think we all need to get together and try to figure out something that we can all work together to get that done.
Thank you. Royal Quint?
Well, I think very similar. I think our community leaders and our state representatives need to get together, take an inventory of what we have to offer in our area, and then come up with a strategic plan and sit down both sides and come up with something that is going to work to help with the mental health issues in our area.
Thank you. If you'll pass the microphone down to Warren Walton.
I think the two gentlemen on the end of this table are probably going to be facing the most questions about this, because all of us here need to understand that these two gentlemen need to be seen immediately, post haste, after the selection is over with. Whoever the winner is, we need to be confronting them about Colfax County and the mental issues that we're facing here, and the inability for us to address this problem. As Mr. Casillas said, and as I hinted to about before, we have no facility here to send these people to, and that is a shame. It's just a crying shame. Whether it be a veteran or just anybody that needs these facilities, needs this help, we have got to do everything we can. We all need to go to the legislature. They will not listen to us until we are in front of their face telling them this is what we need. And the next day we do it again, and the next day we do it again, and the next day again and again and again, until they're tired of hearing from us. We have to be the grease for the wheel. We have to be the grease for the wheel. If we don't do that, we're going to continue down the same road, and we're not going to get the facilities and the help that we need for our people.
Thank you. Sarah Montoya, what can you do to improve mental health outcomes in the region?
All of us can help make better mental health outcomes in the area. And I agree, these two gentlemen are the ones you need to talk to. As citizens, each of you individually need to press them to get funding for mental health in our county. And here's the thing, even if we had the facility, we have to have a recruitment process to get the medical personnel here. Because when people come here, they have to have homes, they have to have schools for their children, they have to have programs for their children. We have to make the community as a whole attractive for the people to want to come here. The medical personnel have to want to come here, and they have to be able to make a living. They've got student loans to pay off, and when you go to medical school, they're high. So they've got to be able to make a living. So we're going to have to work with legislators to get the legislators to get a facility, and very often we've suggested the old hospital. And I think that could be utilized, but we need to focus on getting funding to get that revamped and get the individuals here.
Mr. Chatfield?
Well, I couldn't say it better myself. I think the solution to most problems need to be locally led. I think it needs to come from the ground up, and I think you need somebody in Santa Fe that understands the funding process to make it go.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
This issue is actually very important to me personally. From the get-go, we have been talking about mental health and mental health support in the community of Raton and throughout District 67. We can talk about how the current administration in Santa Fe has ravaged and destroyed our mental health system in this state from the inside out, or we can move forward with the solution. And the solution for me is all hands on deck. This is a community issue. I have been a vocal advocate for certified peer support work. I am signed up to take the training myself, because peer support work, if we can't hire professionals to come here, and until we can hire professionals to come here to provide that, we, the community, need to step up and make sure we're tackling this issue hands-on. And there's no better people to do it than the people in the community. So first, it starts with creating a network and framework inside the community and supporting programs like community or certified peer support workers. And then it does go to making sure that these facilities are fully funded. Just because we're in rural New Mexico does not mean that we shouldn't have our facilities funded. So when our counterparts talk about shrinking government, remember the first people who suffer when they shrink the government is our rural communities, because they take assets and they take resources away from communities like Raton and Clayton and Tucumcari. There's a way to be fiscally responsible and have the state do what we need to do, in particular when it comes to mental health resources, but shrinking the government typically means taking resources away from Raton, New Mexico, and I will not stand for that throughout the entire district.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, if you'll keep the microphone, this next question is directed to you. You mentioned that we have a high tax burden. Given that New Mexico has a pretty low tax, 4.9%, what taxes do you consider are a burden?
I muted myself here. I muted the microphone, I apologize. So When it comes to farmers and ranchers living under burdensome taxes is I think what we're referring to. There are a number of taxes that our farmers and ranchers live under that are unnecessary. A livestock ownership tax, a death tax. These are types of things that are not necessary. It's easier for our farmers and ranchers to not pass their operation onto their children because of the tax that comes along with it. So I'm glad that Mr. Chatfield earlier mentioned diversifying our economy, creating new revenue streams. I think that's horribly important. And so one of the ways we reduce some of these burdensome taxes on our farmers and ranchers that are unnecessary is by increasing our revenue streams, taking serious the opportunity of investing in infrastructure and exportation of clean and renewable energy, which is something we've been talking about from the get-go of our campaign. So we can talk about not relying on oil and gas in the future, but we need a candidate who's proven to not take money from the oil and gas industry, and that starts from the top down. I am that candidate. I want to reinvigorate our economies, build our state from the inside out, reinvest in small business, and not leave our farmers and ranchers under these burdensome taxes, and create revenue streams so that we can start to reduce some of the taxes that they live under.
Thank you. If you would pass the microphone down to our probate judge candidates, this next question is for them. We'll start with Royal Quint. In absence of a will, what is the hierarchy for asset property allocation according to the state of New Mexico?
In the probate process, there's a set schedule that you follow, especially if there is no will. And basically you would go in and look at, basically the spouse would be the first person in line, and then you go on down to the children, and then you work on down to the grandchildren. And there's several steps that you would go to determine who would have interest in the estate of the deceased. So there is a set format that we would follow to do that.
Thank you. Patrick Casillas.
He's absolutely right. It does start with the spouse, then the children, then the grandchildren, and then from there it goes to siblings, brothers and sisters, grandparents, or parents. I believe it goes parents first before grandparents, and then parents before siblings. And from there it goes to aunts and uncles. There is a large format for this, and it is made in state statute that you have to follow that format to get that done.
Thank you. Because this next question is an important topic for Colfax County, it is directed to Steve McFall, Gerald Steve McFall, our U.S. representative. So I'd like to maybe put him on the spot if he'd be willing to come up here. Also, I think we'll probably direct the question to Michelle Garcia Holmes as well as our Lieutenant Governor candidate for the Republican Party. The question is, how would you have approached the problems related to Amtrak in this region?
That's a pretty difficult question. Amtrak, wow. The trains that have come through here, we did a lot for this country when it was the way it used to be, when we had a coal mine running through here. Amtrak by itself really isn't, we miss out on the revenue that it brings in, but it doesn't bring the revenue that supports rebuilding the track. That's one of the biggest problems that we have. Well, for anything to happen as far as that goes, to keep trains going through there, we're going to have federal funding for replacement of tracks, repairing tracks, because that's the safety issues that are really keeping the train from coming through here. We need to work on it to get together with solutions to see, one, how we can bring revenue that the train can support, or that supports the train, bringing it back into this country, but to get funding to rebuild the tracks. That's the biggest issue that I think that we can see is the problem. It's expensive to rebuild that track. So outside that, we're going to have to bring business in again that supports the train, that people use it. The usage of the train has decreased over the years, which is part of the problem too. Mass transit is just not the thing. So there's a whole lot of issues that come together there that need to be worked together. There's not any one answer that can do it. Federal funding or funding for the track, though, is going to be the biggest problem.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you responding to that question. We'll ask Michelle Garcia Holmes the same question. How would you have approached the problems related to Amtrak in this region?
You know, we have to look at the state as a whole. And when I look at different communities utilize their train tracks in different ways, and how to move coal, for one, how to move things for various industries. And we really have to look at each community individually and say, how can we nurture that community, and then utilize the train system, the Amtrak system. And I think it's really important, you know, Steve brought up a good point. New Mexico seems to always suffer with funding issues. And that seems to be one of the biggest issues we've ever had to work on. I mean, one of the questions here this evening was funding. But we're actually looking at a $1.2 billion surplus, and I'm told that they have projections that are going to go out to actually $2 billion because of the oil and gas industry. And looking at that, that gives Congressman Pierce and I, or future Governor Pierce and I, great opportunities to look at how we can utilize the train systems across the state to move product, to move industries along. The other thing I want to mention is we actually have the best tax rate for manufacturing. So individuals who want to come here and manufacture here, and we tapped into that in the Albuquerque area. We are utilizing the train system there. We have manufacturing, the industry along the rail lines. And I think that's really crucial, to study communities and then see how we can enhance what we can do to bring up economic development in those communities. Thank you.
Thank you. If the audience will still continue to pass their questions, we'll continue. Let's see. This one is for our state representative candidates. If you'll pass the microphone down to Mr. Chatfield. Outside of jobs, what do you consider the most important issue for northeastern New Mexico?
For northeastern New Mexico, I think it's water. I think for Raton, it may be the legalization of marijuana in Colorado, which is, I think some of the crime has come down into Raton that brought forth. But water in New Mexico is probably undoubtedly our most important issue.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald?
I think there's two important issues that I'll highlight in addition to economic development and jobs, and that's rural healthcare and rural education. We need to really take a serious look at what we're doing to our rural healthcare facilities. The lack of funding, the unequal and not fair distribution of funding for our rural facilities is a real problem. Not only that, but as I said earlier, I have made a career in healthcare. I've traveled around and am very familiar with healthcare providers throughout the entire district, and the number one problem that we have, whether it's at facilities or whether it's our local ground EMS, volunteer services or paid services, is funding. And we have a backward system of funding for our EMS and fire services in this state. I really think that we need to take a look at that and ensure that our health care in New Mexico, and particularly in rural New Mexico, is fully funded. One thing that I know for sure with a career in healthcare for my entire professional career is that just because you live in rural New Mexico does not mean you don't get sick. And so we need to make sure that we have access to quality health care, but we need to find a way to make sure that when that health care is provided, that we're not putting people in financial jeopardy. So there's a fine balance there. I've dedicated my entire professional career to that, and I continue to do that and will continue to do that as your next state representative. I have only a couple seconds left. We also need to bolster our education, make sure we fund our schools properly, make sure we return power back to the classrooms. I am an educator for emergency medical services, and I know that that education is horribly important, and I hope that we can follow up on that question because I'm out of time.
Okay, well, this question, you actually touched on this in your response, so I'll go ahead and ask you this question, and then we'll ask Mr. Chatfield the same. What is your opinion on reimbursing funding that was swept from key service funds such as fire and EMS? How will you approach House Bill 2 in the upcoming session?
So one of the things that we talk about is this volatile market with oil and gas, and it was mentioned earlier potential $2 billion surplus, and then we look at years past and we know that that surplus was non-existent. In fact, we had shortfalls and deficits. So we need to make sure that, again, we diversify our economy to ensure that we're not riding this roller coaster that is oil and gas in the state of New Mexico. We need to make sure that we are taking serious the politicians who want to invest in diversifying our economy so that our essential services are not left without funding. And that's unfortunately what I think we've seen time and time again under both administrations. And so while I understand the importance of the oil and gas industry in this state, I also understand the importance of securing diversity in our economy, particularly in northern New Mexico, to ensure that our essential services do not go without funding. Again, this is a bipartisan thing we've seen in this state for far too long, and since I took up too much time last time, I'm going to give it over to Mr. Chatfield, but we really need to take serious the idea of not riding this roller coaster that is oil and gas.
Thank you.
Could you repeat the first question?
I sure can. What is your opinion on reimbursing funding that was swept from key service funds such as fire and EMS, and how will you approach House Bill 2 in the upcoming session?
You know, I've talked to some of the current legislators, and there is some will being shown for replacing some of those funds that were swept, but to think that you can replace them is a very simplistic view of what takes place. I myself had $1 million of funding for the watershed project through the state, and I had that matched by $3 million of federal funding for our project. And when the shortfall in funding came, the state had to pull the state funding, and so the project lost the federal funding. So when you lose, almost any of you that work with these state agencies, that work with grants, that understand how the system works, if you lose your matching funds, then you lose the other outside funding that is bringing money into New Mexico. So I think there will be some reparation, but I think it'll be hard to do.
Thank you. If you'll pass the microphone to Sarah Montoya, Magistrate Judge, Democratic Party candidate. Mrs. Montoya, do you support legislation of marijuana? Why or why not?
I believe they're asking legalization of marijuana in New Mexico, and I do not support it. Too many times we hear that marijuana is not a gateway drug. I have been engaged in the legal services here in Colfax County for over 20 years, for 22 years. And too many times I see our youth getting involved with smoking marijuana, and it goes on to bigger things and more serious things. And I think, if you think about it, you will all know that that's true, because we do have a more serious drug problem here in Raton than we have ever had. So I do not support legislation to legalize marijuana in New Mexico. If they want it that bad, they can go to Colorado and stay over there and smoke it. The other thing is, when you're smoking marijuana, how are we going to know when they get behind the wheel whether or not they're safe drivers? We have a huge problem with DUI. So DUI is under the influences of alcohol or drugs, and marijuana is classified as a drug. So how are you going to prevent them from driving?
Okay, same question for candidate Warren Walton. Do you support legalization of marijuana? Why or why not?
I do not support legalization of marijuana. I believe, like Ms. Montoya does, it's a gateway drug. It's just the beginning of things to come. I believe that if we legalize marijuana here in the state, that our children are just going to have an open door. I do not think that marijuana for medical purposes is necessarily a bad thing. We do have a process in New Mexico where you can apply for a license that's given to you by a medical doctor. It's signed and dated, and it can be provided to police officers if you're found with any marijuana. It's a totally legal process for those who need it. But legalizing marijuana across the board is just not a good idea. I truly think, and there's 2 points I want to make with this, I truly think that it's going to, why would you do it in the first place? You know, the proponents to it say, well, we can use the tax dollars to give to our kids and spend money on schools and benefits, right? I don't want our kids having to pay for that. I just don't think it's a good idea. I just don't think it's a good idea. Secondly, most of the people that come to court on marijuana charges are the poor. Are you not taxing the poor? Thank you.
Staying on a similar topic, this question is also for our magistrate judge candidates. Sarah Montoya, what are your plans to combat overcrowding of jails/facilities for repeat drug use offenders?
Well, the limitations are for felony offenses in magistrate court. Felony offenses go to district court. So we as magistrates can't combat overcrowding in prisons, but what we can do is deal with the county VMDC. And what they have done at the county level is they've already increased the space at our jail. It is now 2-tiered, and it's taken a horribly long time to get that thing completed. It's a mess. You can't get in to see clients. The people who are in there are living in dust, in construction dust. So I'm not sure what went wrong with that construction process, but we do have a larger jail here in Colfax County to deal with those that are incarcerated.
Thank you. Warren Walton.
Can you please repeat the question?
What are your plans to combat overcrowding of jails/facilities for repeat drug use offenders?
Well, repeat drug use offenders generally get jail time. What a good judge does is pull up their criminal record on the computer. The individual you see on there, their complete criminal record. It gives a judge the ability to say, hey, from the last 10 years, you've been in here for methamphetamine, heroin, marijuana 3 times, domestic violence, robbery, burglary, whatever it might be. And then the judge then can increase, what is given to that individual based off of what they've done in their past. The jail is in charge of how they handle those folks when they go to the jail. Our warden right now has been sending folks out of county, sending them to Portales and Roswell, because as Ms. Montoya says, the jail is under construction. We generally have rooms for about 42 beds. We've been running consistently at 65, and we've pushed it up to 80 at sometimes. Those folks are shipped out to Portales and different areas, and we the taxpayers pay for that. But hopefully in the end, we're going to get this jail finished, and we'll have a satisfactory jail with a good number of beds that we can continue to maintain the population.
Thank you. If you'll pass the microphone to Christy Graham, candidate for county assessor. What is your goal and priority for the assessor's office in the next 4 years?
My goals for the assessor's office is what we've done in the last 8 years. Educating the taxpayers, letting them know what we are doing, going on the radio station. We do send out notice of values, We let them know when they are going to go out. We do exemptions, and we give them dates. And I want to continue doing that. I think Linda and myself have done such an awesome job the last 8 years. I want to continue that. And we have the best staff in our office, and they will remain in the office. So we'll just continue doing what we've been doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, this next question is for our state representatives. If you'll pass the microphone down to Mr. Chatfield. Will you, if elected to your position, serve the whole body of your constituency without participating in divisive politics?
Yes.
Mr. McDonald, same question.
Is anybody going to get mad at me if I say more than just yes? Absolutely. So when we started this campaign, we chose a campaign slogan, not because we needed one, but because I wanted one. And our campaign slogan was, or is, more in common. Look, I grew up in this community. I grew up in a time where Republicans and Democrats were strictly Republicans and Democrats, and that's really the only political environment that I've ever known is divisive. And I'm tired of it. I am committed to making sure that I work with anyone at any time, regardless of my political affiliation, regardless of your political affiliation, to make sure we're doing what's best for the community. As a healthcare provider, you learn one thing. It doesn't matter who shows up in the back of your ambulance or when they show up, you've got to take care of them. And that's not just a paramedic value, that's not just an EMT value, that's a human value. And when we want to talk about someone to represent our community, a community that I grew up in, I want to make sure that I'm carrying forward with me the value of human dignity. And so working with anybody and everybody, regardless of political affiliation, is my goal. My parents were quite surprised when I came back to this community a Democrat. There's not a lot of my family members who understand that, but I think it's really important to know that I will and have worked with anybody and everybody to ensure that we're doing what's right for the community. I think it's a great question.
Thank you. This question was also directed to the magistrate judge candidates. If you'll pass the mic to Sarah Montoya. Will you, if elected to your position, serve the whole body of your constituency without participating in divisive politics?
As judicial candidates, we really can't participate in politics other than the election process. So I really advocate for judicial candidates not to be either Democrat or Republican. They should just be candidates for office. You have to remain fair and impartial with everything you do, and other than the participation in the election process itself, we're not participating in politics.
Thank you.
I happen to agree with that. My opponent and I apparently agree on one thing, and that is that on our signs, it doesn't say whether we're Democrat or Republican, or at least I don't believe yours do. Mine don't say that I'm Republican. I have a lot of people ask me when I'm handing out my cards, well, what are you, Republican or Democrat? And I tell them, to me, as a judicial candidate, I don't put that on any of my material, but I will tell you that I am Republican. But she's right. We don't get involved in the political process other than these elections. Outside of that, we ride the fence, and that's what we're demanded to do by the Supreme Court.
Thank you. This next question is for our state representative candidates. If you'll pass the mic back down. We'll go ahead and start with Mr. McDonald. This question, audience member asks, will you protect hold harmless for small communities? I believe this is in regards to hold harmless with regards to tax on food and medical. So it says, will you protect hold harmless for small communities?
That's interesting. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I'm not familiar with the wording of what hold harmless is. So I am going to, whoever asked the question, please follow up with me and educate me on what that is. That brings up a good point to say that anybody who thinks they have all the answers, they don't. We need to rely on the community. So it's a really good question, and I'm happy to follow up with you afterwards to make sure I understand what exactly that is.
I am also not familiar with the hold harmless policy.
Okay. As the city treasurer for the city of Raton, I believe that's what this individual is asking. Communities with populations 10,000 or less currently, when the state passed legislation a few years ago to exempt taxes on food and medical, the communities that are below 10,000 in population still receive the gross receipts on those sales. And so I believe there's possibly going to be some legislation that you may be faced with that could put that in jeopardy for small communities.
Can
That's
you answer then?
my understanding. Sure.
So, can we answer the questions now that we understand it?
Yes, please do.
Okay, New Mexico is currently doing a complete rewrite of its tax laws. I don't know how many of you are aware of that. And one of the people that's been privileged to be able to work on that is myself, two cattle growers. And one of the things that the new rewrite did, it was left off the ag exemption, and they really didn't understand why it was there. So we went to them and talked to them about why it was there. Another thing that it was considering being left off was the exemption on tax on food, and we thought that was a very poor idea. So we have been fighting probably for 3 to 4 years with this new tax law to see that happens. And thank you for explaining to me what you were talking about.
Mr. McDonald, would you like to comment?
No, could you repeat your explanation? No, I'm kidding. Again, just being an uninformed, what that specifically entails, it sounds nice, hold harmless, and so again, going back to what I said earlier, the idea that we can't make progress is foolish. So I still hold true to whoever asked the question. Please, let's meet up afterwards and educate me more on what that is. But if it works for our small communities, it protects us, it keeps tax revenues here, or it protects our impoverished communities, I will fight to not only protect that, if that's what it does, but extend it to further communities as well, because we all know our communities in this part of the world tend to struggle a little more than Albuquerque or Santa Fe. So.
Okay, thank you. This question was also directed to Michelle Garcia Holmes. I'm not sure if you want to offer any additional comment on that question.
I just want to say a couple things on it. This has been a really tough issue, and it came in under the Richardson administration, actually, is where it came from. And it's a really tough issue because it does help impoverished communities. It does help individuals, when you don't have to pay tax on food and medical. However, some things can't last forever. Sometimes we have to step in and change how we do things. But I want to defer back to, and thank you for your work on tax reform, because Representative Jason Harper has probably one of the best tax reform bills that I have ever seen in my entire life. And in fact, talk about working together and crossing the aisle, it made it through the House to the Senate. And it's really unfortunate. The reason it didn't get passed and didn't make it to Susana Martinez's desk is because the Senate did not want Susana Martinez to have a win at the end of the day, something that made her look good. And it's really bad when we do tax reform and we want to make things better for impoverished communities, for business, for small business, and then things like that happen. We have to learn to work together, because that's how we're going to save New Mexico.
You'll pass the microphone to Magistrate Judge Candidate Sarah Montoya. This question is, what changes do you plan to bring to magistrate court if elected?
Well, first and foremost, I'm going to be more user-friendly. I'll treat the attorneys with respect. They are officers of the court. I won't treat them like they're there to attack somebody. I will treat the members of the public with respect. You're not allowed to enter the courtroom with a cell phone, with a backpack, with a purse. And sometimes there is nowhere to put these things, number one. And there's no safe place to leave them if someone is poor and they walked all the way to court. There's nowhere to put them. So you'll probably hear argument that, oh, it's for the safety of the public, it's for the safety of the clerks, it's for the, you know, you can't walk around scared. You can't walk around scared. And if it's that bad, then you need to get a metal detector. We had a woman come into court with a teenage son and a little child. The little child wasn't allowed in the courtroom, and the mother had to choose between her children to either go in with the teenager or stay outside with her child. So I babysat the child for her when I realized the dilemma she was in. We just need to be more user-friendly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Montoya. Okay, a couple more questions. If the audience members have any more questions, please pass them to our runners. We will probably conclude our forum here in just a bit with our closing statements, but we'll try to get a few more questions in. This would be for our state representative candidates. If you'll pass the microphone down. We'll start with Mr. McDonald. What is your stance on the sale of public lands to private property?
That's a good question. Look, we all know that public lands in the state provide tax revenue and tax stream to our schools, and so I think that's really important to protect. I think that our state lands and the lands that generate that revenue need to be protected unless the private sale makes complete sense. I don't think that I'm going to have a whole lot to say about that, but I do know that our public lands are horribly important to protect the continuity and make sure that we have, again, from the top down, someone who knows how to manage not only the state, but the Public Land Commission office to take advantage and leverage our state lands to help our smaller rural communities. So again, I think that protecting our public lands is horribly important. I can't imagine a situation where selling public lands would make a lot of sense, but I'm sure there are certain cases.
Thank you, Mr. Chatfield. Same question. What is your stance on the sale of public lands to private property?
Let me just start by saying that BLM land is public land, Forest Service land is public land, state land is state trust land. That land is put there to pay for the education of our school children. It is leased to ranchers for grazing. The mineral rights are leased to oil companies to extract the mineral, the oil, gas, gold, silver. The various different hunting rights are leased to the state Game and Fish Department to help provide for their income. It is not public land, but if you are talking about selling state land, I think there's a few instances when it has been necessary and wise, and some of that is if you're next door to Albuquerque and you have an area that needs, people need to build homes on it, that might be a time. I think you need to just be really careful about who you choose for your state land commissioner. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a few more questions here, and I think I'll just combine two of them into one. They're fairly short. Once again, for our District 67 state representative candidates, Mr. Chatfield, if you'll keep the microphone. What is your pulse on the youth? And then the other question is, what is your view of transgender rights in the schools?
What is my pulse on the youth?
What is your pulse on the youth?
Well, I was on the school board for 16 years. I was president of the school board a good portion of that time. While I was there, we built an indoor arena. We had one child from Mascaro that has 50 students. We had one child that went to the national finals twice. We have a newspaper that has 500 subscriptions, goes out all over the world. We built a new gymnasium. We have a top-of-the-line school. We have an art program where our kids did a paint the town, did murals on the town. Jill and I went to the FFA National Convention, I think it's going on right now, with our kids. Transgender youth in school, I think they have no more rights or less rights than any other person.
Thank you. Mr. McDonald, same question. What is your pulse on the youth? And what is your view of transgender rights in the schools?
Sure, absolutely. The pulse on the youth is something we talked about beforehand. In fact, I said in Portales I had to have my parents sign a waiver in order for me to be able to run, which was mostly a joke. But, you know, making sure that our youth is engaged is important, and I think that that's why my run for this office is so unique. We have become somewhat okay with the idea of youth being disengaged from politics. I'm happy to be the acting chair for the New Mexico Young Democrats for Colfax County. That's a chapter that we're getting started, but it's not, again, it's not about Democratic versus Republican. It's about making sure that everybody feels welcome at the table. My kiddo is sitting right back here in the audience today. If you've been to my campaign events and I have him, you know that I bring my kid to events. He's only 3 years old, but making sure our youth feel engaged and involved and important, and making sure that my son is not the one who grows up feeling like his vote doesn't count is horribly important to me. So I want to make sure our youth are involved, educated, and engaged and active. When it comes to LGBTQ rights in our schools, look, particularly trans rights, I think that was the question, was trans rights? Is that correct?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. Well, it doesn't matter. LGBTQ rights are human rights. These are rights that we need to stand up and protect. When I talk about more in common, I know that this community really believes that people should be treated with dignity, and that starts from a young age. It's making sure that our children grow up in a society and in an environment and communities where they feel welcome and where they feel dignified, and I will fight for that. It's a fight that I'm happy to take on and lead the charge in this part of the country, along with many other folks in the audience tonight.
Thank you. Fortunately, this next question is once again for our state representative candidates. So I'm down to just a couple of questions left here. What is your stance on a mid-level dental provider, and how do you feel the legalization of such position would benefit rural New Mexico?
Absolutely. It's just like any other mid-level provider, right? More hands on deck, and I think it's a good idea. I think that we're seeing a trend in medicine in general where we're encouraging mid-level providers to be active and engaged, particularly in rural healthcare, and I think that's really important. Look, I said earlier that just because you live in rural New Mexico doesn't mean you don't get sick, and just because you live in rural New Mexico doesn't mean you don't deserve access to quality healthcare, and that starts with our children and goes all the way through our seniors. And part of that healthcare that is so important to, particularly to our impoverished communities, is dental care. So if we can encourage a system where we have mid-level dental providers who can be an active participant in our community healthcare, I think that that's not only something I would support, but ask for funding from the state, because again, it is horribly important. And so yes, I would be very supportive of it.
I said earlier that I supported our local health clinics, and if we're able to afford that level of service to them, great.
Okay, this will be the final question. This once again is for our state representative candidates. I'm not sure that I can read part of it, but it says, what is the either PEC or REC, and what is their function? And how do they help our schools, and where do they get their funding?
The PEC, is that correct?
It's the REC.
Oh, the REC, okay. Yeah. Okay, yeah, absolutely. So this is, the REC is really important to make sure that they oversee the operations of our school, and to make sure that they have adequate funding is important. Mr. Chatfield, of course, as he said, was on the school board for 16 years. And so he's going to have more information in regards to this question, but as far as where their funding comes from, I don't have the exact details, but I do support the REC, and I think that we need to make sure that they're more active and engaged, not just with the school, but with the community in general.
Yeah, so like I say, I was on the school board 16 years, so I do understand that the REC, the board, is the superintendents for the local area of northeastern New Mexico. And the function of the REC is to provide all the services for these smaller schools that we can't really afford. Not each individual school in northeastern New Mexico can't afford a speech therapist or a physical therapist or a variety of other services. So these are provided by the REC. Their funding is essential. I spoke about it a little bit earlier. This year, Ruidoso REC did not get funded. This REC and Raton did not get funded. They were the only two in the state that were left out. When House Bill 2 was completed, the executive director of the REC contacted me, and at that point figured there was not much that you can do, but they have a little thing down there called the conference committee, and if it hasn't happened, the funding hasn't been put into the bill, so we got the money put back in.
Okay, thank you. That will conclude the question and answer portion of the forum. We will now begin in reverse order of our opening statements, and we'll do our closing statements. So if you'll pass the microphone down to Mr. Quint, our Republican candidate for probate judge. Each candidate will be given a 2-minute closing statement.
I just want to again thank the Raton PBW for sponsoring this candidates forum. Here we go. Sorry about that. I want to again thank the Raton PBW for sponsoring this candidates forum and for everyone who is in attendance. I want to assure you that if I'm elected, all probate proceedings will be handled in a fair and impartial manner as required by probate law. As probate judge, I will bring integrity and compassion to this position to ensure that the citizens of Colfax County receives the assistance that they deserve. I want to thank you, and I respectfully ask for your vote on November 6, 2018, and I want to thank the other candidates that are running for this office and plus the other offices. Thank you.
As part of my closing statement, I want to kind of go back on my law enforcement career. As a law enforcement officer in the sheriff of this county, I was given several writs of execution, writs of court orders from Judge Walton, Judge Sanchez, Judge Paternoster. I'm familiar with the court proceedings and paperwork that goes along with the court proceedings. I am familiar with county government. I am familiar with county budgets. I am familiar with the court that is in the probate, which is handled by the county clerk's office. I have a good working relationships with those people. I have good relationships with the assessor's office. I have good relationships within our county and our citizens of our county because I was a county sheriff for many years. As a probate judge, I am going to be that same individual that I always was, fair and good to everybody, be able to come to me at any time, not just during proceedings, but if you have a problem, I'm going to direct you to the right direction in the court that needs to be done. I can't give you legal advice, but I will be able to advise you my times that I'll be in the office and the times that you can come in and direct you to the right appropriate positions. I will be fair to everybody, and I will take this job seriously, just as I did my county sheriff's position. Thank you, and I want to recommend everybody here that's here. I mean, this takes a lot of guts to come up here and run for office, and these individuals are great individuals that do this. And I also want to tell Mr. Quinn also, thank you for coming out here and running also. He's a good man, and I like Mr. Quinn, and I think this is going to be a very good situation for both of us. And I also want to thank everybody in the public for coming out tonight, Professional Business Women's Association and KRTN for all their hard work they did tonight. And I appreciate your vote on November 7th, or anytime you want to go to the county clerk's office. They are now doing early voting. So thank you very much.
Thank you everyone for coming out tonight and the individuals that are listening on the radio. A big thank you to KRTN, Billy D. He does such an awesome job, along with the business professional women, and of course the candidates for coming out to the forum. I want to also thank all the veterans for their service, my friends and family for all their support during this time, my staff. We have such an awesome staff and the Lord above. Again, my name is Christy Graham and have been the Chief Deputy Assessor for 8 years. I am New Mexico's certified appraiser and have 4 certifications through New Mexico State EDGE program. Thank you. Vote Christy Graham, November 6th.
So I'd like to also thank the PPW for putting this on tonight. KRTN, as Christy said, Billy D, you're awesome. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight and for the listeners for listening. This is a long drawn out process, as we all well know. I want to thank the public for putting up with all the signs and the literature and the commercials and the shaking of hands and the knocking on your door. I want to thank all the dogs for not biting. I want to thank KarenWalton.com at Raton Schools, whatever the address is, I'm not sure. But my wife, Karen Walton, hon, you're amazing. You've pushed me and pushed me and pushed me through this job, and I have so much respect for you. You deserve so much credit. There are 2 people here that I have ignored, and they are Amy Ronich and Kristen Ordonez. I want you 2 to stand up. These are my 2 clerks. I know you don't want to stand up, please do. These 2 girls are amazing. They handle the public at the windows with a smiling face. Everybody that comes to court isn't exactly happy, and they know exactly how to deal with them. Amy Ronich, by the way, is our Clerk of the Year for Northeastern New Mexico, so she deserves a little bit of applaud for that. I want you to know, when there's nothing to do in court, I am not sitting on my hands. I am very active in this community. I'm very active in Santa Fe. I have spent sleepless nights, many sleepless nights in Santa Fe. I have walked miles in the legislative, during the legislative sessions, pumping hands, meeting people, the governor, the lieutenant governor, all the representatives, all the senators, fighting for bills for Colfax County and for the judiciary. I want you to know that I do not sit on my hands. Bring your differences to the magistrate court where we handle them civilly, professionally, ethically, and impartially. Thank you. I appreciate your vote on November 6th.
I want to thank PBW for having this. I was a member of that organization back when it was BPW and Young Careerist in 1986. It was a wonderful experience. I moved on from there to Kiwanis Club. I served on the city council when we had councilmen dropping like flies. I stepped up and volunteered to be appointed. I served on the water board. I served on the housing board. And I have been serving as a public defender for 22 years. I feel like by taking that job on, I've given back to the community and I've tried to help everyone. If I get this job, it's actually a cut and pay for me. So why would I do it? Because it's something that needs to be done. I think it's abhorrent that we have a judge that's on probation, will be on probation until the end of the year, and he's putting people on probation. There's something inherently not fair about that. So I'm stepping up to the plate to put my name in for consideration so that we can replace the incumbent who's been there far too long. So I would appreciate your support in doing that. We need to clean it up in Colfax County. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Thank you all for coming out. There's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on while I had just a few minutes. One of them is funding for our public schools. A few years ago, Jimmy Hall, Representative Jimmy Hall, brought forth legislation that would change the funding formula for our public schools, and it gave a little extra money to these small rural schools. Some of you that are involved in education may remember when that happened. It's been 2, maybe 3 years ago, and it gives a little more money to our rural schools than per student than what the students in Albuquerque, and because it takes a little more out here in the country. One of the other things that I would like to talk about is each year Senator Udall comes out and tours our watershed project and works with us and talks about what we're doing with the federal money that's brought down here into our watersheds. And each year Senator Heinrich does the same. I have at home a letter of recommendation that has Senator Udall, Senator Heinrich, has Steve Pierce and Ben Ray Lujan all signed off in support of this project for a $3.6 million grant that we did bring in and treat mesquite using that funding. So I do have a working relationship with our congressional delegation. I have a working relationship on those things that we have in common, which is a healthy watershed, safety from fire. I've been at it a long time. It's not my first rodeo. Once again, my name is Jack Chatfield. I'm running for State Representative District 67, and I would really appreciate your vote.
I too want to thank everybody for coming out this evening, and thank you for hosting this to the PBW, and again, as I said in the beginning of the forum, thank you to the community for being engaged and active in the political process. This is my first rodeo. This is my first run for public office. I've done so proudly. I've done so with great support, not only from this community, but from community members throughout the entire district. I have to ask myself, over the last 10 years, have things gotten better or worse in Raton? Have things gotten better or worse for our small businesses, for our healthcare structure, for our schools throughout the district? And over the last 10 years, not only have we had the same representation, but we've had the same advisement for our representation over that period of time. There's no doubt in my mind that anybody in Santa Fe goes with the good intentions. But my theory has always been, if you go to Santa Fe with a problem and not a solution, you leave Santa Fe with a problem. I'm going to Santa Fe with the problems, but also with solutions. Solutions that will help reinvest in our small businesses. Solutions that will help make sure that a business like Solano's, who has been here and a bedrock of this community for many years, is given just as fair a tax advantage as our oil and gas industries, or as the businesses that come here get a tax haven for a couple of years and then move on. Farming and ranching is horribly important. There's always work to do to protect our farmers and ranchers. I grew up on a ranch. I'm invested in farming and ranching. But it's time that we elect someone who knows how to protect, invest, and support small business, who knows how to intermingle corporations and the right corporations in our communities, somebody who has a full aspect approach to doing what's right for this community. I thank you for your support. I hope for your vote on November 6th. And again, my name is Mark McDonald, and I'm proud to be your Democratic nominee for state representative.
Thank you to all of our candidates for participating this evening. I'd also like to give our Lieutenant Governor candidate an opportunity to provide some closing remarks, and then we'll follow by our U.S. Representative candidates. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank PBW, and I believe the radio station is Curtin. Is that what it is? Do they make jokes about that on the radio? I just thank you for the opportunity to be here tonight. I'm one of those stories. I'm born and raised in New Mexico. I got the best of both worlds, and I want to share with the listeners tonight and you all. My family comes from a small ranching community. And maybe you've heard of it, Pastura, New Mexico. Maybe not. My grandmother was a teacher in Vaughn. I used to spend my summers in Pastura, New Mexico. And of course, like I told you before, I was born and raised in Albuquerque. So I got the best of both worlds. And now, traveling on the campaign trail with Steve Pierce, being able to run for lieutenant governor, I think it's a great opportunity because you're going to have a lieutenant governor and a governor that understands New Mexico. The other aspect of my background that I want to share with you is I served as a commissioned policewoman for 30 years. And 20 of those years I spent with the Albuquerque Police Department. I spent another 8 years as Chief of Staff for the New Mexico Attorney General's Office. So when I was with the Attorney General's Office, I spent a lot of time with the state legislature. I helped pass the first human trafficking bill. I'm not a rookie in this. I will approach that legislature and hold people to task. We need to hold people to task. We need to make sure our elected officials are accountable. I helped start the first statewide government corruption unit. We have to stop corruption in New Mexico. And we have to make sure funding goes to where it's supposed to go. Education. Our small businesses need tax reform. Can we get these things done? Can we cross party lines? Can we take care of New Mexico? Yes, we can. Please vote November 6th for Steve Pierce. If he wins, I win. If we win, New Mexico wins.
And our United States Representative Republican candidate present this evening, Gerald Steve McFall.
Again, thanks for the businesswomen for holding this. Thank you guys for showing up. It's so hard to stand up here and put your money where your mouth is. It's frustrating to come out when you plan an event, you go out and there's 2 people there. Sometimes you go out and there's 100 people there, but thank you guys for showing up. It's important. Thank you, Billy D, for putting this on the radio and letting us have airtime. That is invaluable to us to get that out to that many people. And again, thanks to everybody for participating. I was born here in Raton, 1965. Most of you know at least one of my family in Springer, my family in Raton. I'm a farm boy. I'm not a career politician. I've been blessed in my life for 25 years. I got to ski and fish and play golf for a living. Now, who would want to change something like that to be a target for half the population? Or be called names or ridiculed by people that don't even know me? None of that really bothers me. I'm here because God chose me to do this job and got my attention by knocking me all the way to homeless. I dug myself out of that. I just ask for people to pray that those of us that are out to help people win this race. It is a divided country right now. I'm in this to go to Washington, D.C. to help, one, drain the swamp. I am a supporter of President Trump. I have a Make America Great hat. I love what's going on. We need people up there that aren't career politicians that understand what's going on with we the people. I am of we the people. So I ask for your support, I ask for your prayers, and please, if you have any questions afterward, feel free to ask. You can go to my website, mcfallforcongress.com. It has my viewpoints on everything. It also has how you can contact me. If you feel so inclined, you can hit the donate button and help us out there. But again, thank you all for showing up. Thank you for allowing us to speak to you tonight. Thank you, candidates, for being here, and have a good evening. God bless you.
That concludes our forum. The Raton Professional Businesswomen is honored to present this forum and any other forum that we have done for the community, and we do it so that you can make an informed decision on election day. So we do encourage you to, we have sample ballots available in the lobbies, so we do encourage you, if you haven't already voted, to take a sample ballot with you. Please reach out to the candidates before the election if any of your questions weren't asked or answered this evening. I'm sure they would be more than happy to visit with you about your concerns. So thank you again.